I stood in the corner of the banquet hall, just behind the arch of golden balloons and the ridiculous ice sculpture of a man holding a fishing rod. My dad's idea of a classy touch. People were already tipsy on the open bar, laughing too loud, clinking glasses filled with overpriced champagne. A jazz quartet played near the stage. The saxophonist slightly off-tempo, but no one cared. They were all too busy basking in their own small glories. My family was gathered near the head table, circling my father like planets orbiting a tired sun. There were name cards, polished wine glasses, and framed photos of him at every age baby. High school quarterback, newlywed, middle-aged, with that smug executive smile. 60 years old today, and he still commanded the room like a CEO at a company he hadn't worked at in 10 years. I watched as he motioned for the microphone. The band quieted, and so did the crowd. His voice rang out with that same rehearsed charm that used to make me feel small. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight to celebrate, especially my kids," he said, grinning. "Each one of them has made me proud. My son Jacob just promoted to partner at his law firm. Marcy, our world-traveling pediatrician ... And, of course," he added with that familiar chuckle, "my youngest, Ellie, the jobless one." "Still figuring it out, right, sweetheart?" The room erupted in polite laughter. I didn't smile, I didn't flinch. I just stood there, unseen behind the soft glow of fairy lights, hands folded loosely in front of me. No one knew I had paid for the entire party. Not the rented hall with its crystal chandeliers, not the catered menu flown in from Napa Valley, not the valet staff, the custom linens, or the floral centerpieces designed by a woman who once did work for Beyoncé. And certainly not my father, who had signed off on a party generously sponsored by his former colleagues. At least that's what he was told. I sipped my drink and let their laughter roll off me like smoke. The Ellie they thought they knew hadn't existed for years. The Ellie they dismissed at dinners. The Ellie who once overheard her own mother say, "She's sweet, but she'll never quite make it." The Ellie who sat quietly at every Thanksgiving table, listening to siblings talk about mortgage rates and stock options like she didn't even understand English. I had grown used to their perception of me, a cute little underachiever with potential. A potential they had already quietly buried. But tonight, as I stood in a dress that cost more than my brother's monthly rent, watching them toast to their version of reality, I felt no anger, only stillness and a deep, deliberate satisfaction. Because tonight, I would remind them without a single boast or raised voice that I had arrived. I was not jobless. I was not struggling, and I was done asking to be seen. They wouldn't know what hit them, but they'd remember it forever. Growing up in the Whitaker household was like living inside a corporate resume. Everything was a performance. My parents didn't just raise children, they curated achievements. Report cards were reportable events. Soccer trophies went on the mantle like stock certificates. Even minor accomplishments, like Jacob getting a summer internship at a law office, were celebrated with steak dinners. I, on the other hand, was the afterthought. I wasn't bad. I just wasn't notable. I was the artsy one. The quiet one, the sensitive one, which in our family was code for she won't amount to much. I liked to draw. I read constantly. I built websites in middle school just for fun. But none of that fit their mold of success. It didn't come with medals or matching blazers. At first, I tried to keep up. I joined the debate team, even though speaking in front of people made me sweat through my shirts. I enrolled in a PE calculus because Jacob had done it, and failed the first test so badly I cried in the bathroom stall for 20 minutes. One Thanksgiving, I tried to explain a side project. I was working on an online platform for freelance designers that I'd started coding myself. I was 16. My dad chuckled and said, "Sounds like a nice little hobby. You should think about business school instead. You'll need something real to fall back on." That word stuck with me, real. Like what I was doing didn't count unless it fit their narrow, shiny template. The thing is, when you're constantly underestimated, you start to believe they might be right. You shrink a little. You laugh along with the jokes. You stop volunteering your voice because what's the point? At family gatherings, I was always seated at the far end of the table, sandwiched between toddlers and cousins I barely knew. I'd hear things like, "Jacob just bought a house in Bethesda." 4 bedrooms. Marcy's research got picked up by a journal again. She's flying to Geneva next month. And then, inevitably, someone would glance toward me and ask, "So, Ellie, are you still figuring things out?" The way they said it softly, sympathetically, like I was some lost pet that hadn't found its way home. I wanted to scream. Instead, I'd smile and nod. I remember one particular Christmas. Jacob had gifted our parents a one-of-the-month subscription. Marcy had donated to a children's hospital in their name. I had handmade a wooden photo frame with a laser-etched family portrait. I'd worked on it for weeks in my small apartment, staining the wood and programming the engraving machine late into the night. My mom unwrapped it, blinked, and forced a smile. "Oh, Dot, thank you, honey. That's sweet." She never displayed it. Instead, a framed photo of Jacob and his law firm partners appeared on the mantle by New Year's. I learned to stop trying. I moved out at 20, funded by freelance gigs and part-time design work. I'd send occasional text updates they never asked for just to stay in their orbit. Got a new client today. Won a small business grant. Launched my first app. The replies were always the same. "Proud of you, kiddo. Glad you're staying busy." Worse, silence. I was 25 when I stopped reaching out altogether. That year, I didn't come home for Thanksgiving. No one asked why. I watched their holiday photos from Instagram Jacob's daughter sitting in my usual seat. "Family is everything" caption below it. That hurt in a way I can't explain. Not because I wasn't there, but because no one seemed to notice. I wasn't the black sheep. That would have required too much attention. I was invisible. And maybe that was worse. Still, invisibility has its uses. When no one's watching, you can build something in peace. When no one expects anything from you, the wins feel sharper. Purer, like they're truly yours. And over time, the ache of rejection hardened into something solid, something useful. I didn't need to be celebrated. I needed to be underestimated. Because that meant I could move quietly, without pressure or noise. So I did, but I never forgot the sound of my dad's voice calling me the jobless one. That memory stayed with me, long enough to become the fuel I didn't even know I was storing. After I stopped trying to impress my family, something shifted. I poured myself into the work, not to prove anything to them anymore, but to finally explore the space they never allowed me to claim. The space where I got to be enough, where I didn't need anyone's applause. At first, it was just a handful of freelance design jobs, logos for Etsy shops, simple websites for small local brands. But the more I worked, the more word spread. People liked how I listened, how I asked the right questions, how I didn't just make things pretty, I made them work. At 24, I officially launched my own agency. 1 client, then 3. Then I was booked out for 6 months straight. I called it LO Creative, a quiet nod to the name they never bothered to take seriously. Most days, I worked in a tiny studio apartment that smelled faintly of old carpet and ambition. I barely went out. I learned SEO by moonlight, email marketing by trial, and taxes by panic. I drank too much coffee and cried at least once a week from sheer exhaustion. But I kept going. I was making enough to live comfortably. And then one day, comfortably turned into well. Then very well. A marketing firm in Chicago found me through a client referral. They didn't just want a website, they wanted a complete brand overhaul. That one deal paid more than my parents' annual mortgage. I didn't tell them. By 27, I'd hired my first employee. By 28, I had 12. We weren't huge, but we were lean, efficient, and respected. We specialized in high-end brand strategy for underdog startups, people like me who were never taken seriously until they forced the world to listen. I never showed off, never posted flashy boss babe quotes or fake hustle culture videos. I just worked, quietly, relentlessly. My agency won an award for design innovation 2 years in a row. I bought out 2 competitors. I spoke at a national design conference and was offered a book deal I turned down because I didn't want the attention. All while my family still thought I was figuring it out. Every now and then, I'd get a vague message from my mom. "Hope you're keeping your head up, sweetheart." Or from Jacob. "Ever thought about getting into law school?" I could put in a word. I didn't respond. Let them think I was still fumbling. that I was floating through life on whims and borrowed time. The truth was, I had grown into a woman they wouldn't even recognize in a crowd. Confident, strategic, calm. The kind of leader who didn't need to raise her voice because everyone leaned in when she spoke. I started seeing a therapist too, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to heal without bitterness. She asked me once, "Do you want them to know how far you've come?" And I said, "Not really." But that wasn't entirely true. I didn't need them to validate me, but I wanted the girl I used to be, the one sitting quietly at the far end of the table, carving turkey no one noticed, to have her moment. Not to say, "Look at me," but to say, "I was never what you thought." So when the email came in an invitation to my dad's 60th birthday party, organized by my older siblings, I almost deleted it. But then I saw the note at the bottom. "If you want to chip in for decorations, let Marcy know. We're keeping it low key." And that's when the idea came. Not out of spite, not even revenge, but opportunity. A quiet, exquisite opportunity to turn their little gathering into something extraordinary and never tell them it was me. I made a few calls, reached out to a client who ran luxury events, made a sizable anonymous donation through her firm. I upgraded the venue, flew in the catering, paid for live music, sent over a design brief for custom signage, lighting, and layout. Personalized touches that would make it feel like something far grander than what they'd imagined. My name never appeared on the invoice. When my dad's assistant asked who to credit, I used the alias I often applied to passion projects, E. Witt. They assumed it was a corporate sponsor. And so the whispers began. Who covered all this? Marcy said it wasn't her. Did Jacob spring for this? Nope, he said they were barely pitching in. I stayed silent. In the days leading up to the event, I watched from a distance as they posted photos of the preparations like they pulled it all off themselves. Marcy even made a comment in the group chat. "Can't believe how classy this is going to be. Dad will love it." She had no idea. And that was the point. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do ... is not tell them. Not throw your success in their faces. Just let them bask in what they think they created while knowing deep down that the foundation was yours. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for closure. And it was coming. The night of the party arrived like a slow-burning fuse. The lights dimmed just enough to soften the edges of the room, but the atmosphere was anything but soft. I could hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, the rustle of silk dresses and pressed suits. I stepped into the grand hall, dressed in a sleek midnight blue gown that wasn't flashy, but spoke of quiet elegance. My heels clicked softly on the marble floor as I moved past the guests, some of whom glanced my way but quickly looked away, uncertain. They saw the girl who hadn't shown up to family dinners, the one they'd labeled jobless and invisible. But they didn't see the woman who had built an agency from scratch, who managed a thriving business, who held contracts with Fortune 500 companies, all while never needing their approval. I made my way to the back of the room, eyes scanning for the man of the hour, my father. He stood near the head table, animated and oblivious, surrounded by his usual entourage of old colleagues and sycophants. The MC cleared his throat, stepping up to the microphone. The room hushed. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate my father's 60th birthday," the voice announced. "We have a very special guest here to introduce the evening's events, someone who has played a huge role behind the scenes." My heart beat steadily as the spotlight swung toward me. I approached the stage calmly, each step measured. The MC smiled, then said, "Please welcome Ellie Whitaker." A flicker of confusion swept through the room. Ellie Whitaker? That name hadn't been spoken in a long time. My father's smile faltered for the briefest moment. His eyes searched mine, surprise, disbelief, something close to respect hiding behind the mask. I nodded politely, took the microphone, and glanced out at the crowd. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady. "I'm honored to help make this evening special." When I received the invitation, I wanted to contribute in a way that truly reflects how much Dad means to all of us. There was a pause and unspoken question hanging in the air. Without needing to say more, I let the silence speak. The band began to play softly again. Waiters moved through the room with trays of champagne, and the guests started to settle, now watching me with new eyes. I stepped down quietly, returning to the shadows just as I had come. Behind me, I heard a whispered conversation. Did she say she organized this? Is that the jobless one? She single quotes S dot dot different. My siblings exchanged glances. My mother's eyes brimmed with something unspoken regret, perhaps, or realization. My father's jaw clenched for a moment before he turned away, masking the turmoil with a practiced smile. I didn't need to confront anyone. The moment had already spoken louder than words. They had introduced me as the jobless one. I had funded the entire party, and now they couldn't ignore me. Because real power doesn't shout. It waits. It builds. Then it moves quietly, so quietly that when it arrives, the room falls silent, not out of fear, but because it knows it can no longer be denied. Tonight, I was that power. The days after the party were quieter than I expected. No grand declarations, no dramatic confrontations. But the subtle shifts began almost immediately. My phone buzzed with messages from family members who hadn't spoken to me in years. Allie, can we talk? From Marcy. Would love to catch up. From Jacob. Mom wants to see you. A simple note from my dad's assistant. I didn't rush to respond. I wanted to meet their tentative outreach on my own terms, not because I craved approval, but because I needed to be sure I was ready. When I finally agreed to see my mother, it wasn't in the grand house where I'd grown up. It was at a quiet cafe near my apartment, a neutral space where I could hold the conversation with distance. She looked older than I remembered, lines etched deep from years of holding things in. Her eyes searched mine for signs of resentment, but I held steady. I'm sorry, she said simply. For everything, for not seeing you, for making you feel small. I nodded slowly. I needed to find myself outside of all that. I needed to build without your expectations. She reached across the table, but I didn't take her hand. Not yet. It hurts that you stayed away. Maybe it hurt, I admitted, but it also made me stronger. Jacob was next. Our conversation was less tender, more pragmatic. You've done well, he said, almost grudgingly. I guess we underestimated you. I smiled, but it wasn't victory. It was understanding. I was never trying to compete with you. He looked surprised. Then why? For myself, to prove to the girl I was that she was worth so much more than their words. The calls from my father came weeks later. His voice was quieter than I remembered. Ellie, I'm proud of you. I always have been. I paused. The weight of years folded between us. Thank you, I said. But I don't need your pride anymore. I hope you can forgive me. I forgive you, I replied. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing peace. What surprised me most wasn't their apologies. It was the relief I felt when I realized I didn't have to carry their judgment anymore. The truth is, this journey wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. That I could rise not in spite of their doubt, but because of it. That my worth was never tied to their recognition. That silent strength doesn't need applause. It simply is. It's been months since that night. Life has settled into a rhythm that feels lighter. The edges of old wounds aren't sharp anymore, more like gentle reminders of how far I've come. My family hasn't suddenly transformed into a perfect, loving circle. We're still learning, still awkwardly navigating this new dynamic. But there are moments now, small, almost invisible gestures that speak louder than words. A text from my mother on my birthday, simply saying, thinking of you. Jacob sharing an article about startups, knowing I'll appreciate it. Even Dad asking, can you help me pick out a new suit? His way of admitting he sees me differently. I don't hold these moments up like trophies. I don't need them to validate my worth. Because I've learned something more important. True strength isn't about forcing others to recognize you. It's about recognizing yourself. It's about knowing your value when the world ignores you. It's about choosing your own path, even when the road is lonely. And most of all, it's about silence. Not the silence of invisibility, but the silence of confidence. The kind that lets you build quietly, love fiercely, and walk through life without needing to prove a thing. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Your worth is not defined by the voices that doubt you. It's defined by the courage to keep going. even when those voices are loudest. So if you're sitting somewhere feeling unseen or underestimated, remember this. You are already enough. You are already powerful, and your moment to shine is coming. It just might arrive quietly without fanfare, without noise, but it will come. And when it does, no one will forget.